In this video, we will look at how to use GeoGebra to calculate the mean and the standard deviation for a set of data values. The first thing we should cover is what the standard deviation is. The standard deviation is a number that measures how far data values are from their mean. The standard deviation provides a numerical measure of the overall amount of variation in a data set and can be used to determine whether a particular data value is close to or far from the mean. The example that's given says find the sample variance and standard deviation. And then they give us some easy data values here. If we were to do this by hand to calculate the actual variance or change from the mean, we would have to find the mean first. So we'll go over that really quickly in GeoGebra. What we can do here is enter our data values using the set bracket, or in this case we will type in A equals the curly brackets 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Now we have our data values. So really quickly, in GeoGebra, in order to define a variable, all you need to do is type in that letter and use the equals button. Or you can type in a word as well. In order to define a list of data, we need to use the notation for the data values, which is the curly bracket. The curly bracket is also the set notation. If you're using an app, either on your phone or a tablet, you'll have to use the f of x option in the on-screen keyboard. Or if you're using your keyboard like on a laptop, or if you have a Bluetooth keyboard attached to your tablet, the curly brackets or the set brackets are on the right side of your keyboard, just above the enter button. You might have to use the shift button to access them. From here, in GeoGebra, we can find the mean of the data values by typing in mean, open parentheses A, pressing enter. So we can find that the mean here, x bar, is 4. This is the sample mean. We can also calculate the sample standard deviation. The sample standard deviation is the letter S, and we can find that by typing in STDEV. When we type this in, there are two different types of standard deviations. This is the sample standard deviation, and this is the population standard deviation. So in GeoGebra, you type in STDEV, open parentheses, and then your data to find the sample standard deviation. So in this case, we're going to type in STDEV, open parentheses, A. As you notice, I am not a huge fan of using the drop-down menus. It gets a little bit confusing based on which one you click and how do we click it and all the other things. So I'm going to just type in STDEV, open parentheses, A. So we find that the sample standard deviation is 2.16. Now, if we were to do these calculations by hand, we would need to find the mean, find the deviations from the mean. So we would take each data value and subtract the mean from it. And then we would need to square all of those data values so that we can find the overall amount of variation. When we take that overall amount of variation and divide it by the sample size, or 1 minus the sample size, we will get the variance. The variance is the overall amount of variation divided by the sample size in terms of squared units. There is a formula here, which you might see in textbooks or in other online resources. However, all we need to do for the variance is to square the standard deviation. So the sample variance is just the standard deviation squared. GeoGebra makes this quite nice because all we need to do is type in C, or whatever other letter we have that defines the standard deviation, and then go to f of x. I apologize, it's not an f of x, it is in the 1, 2, 3 button, squared. So again, C, go to 1, 2, 3, squared, press enter, and that will give us the variance, 4.6 repeated. We could have also typed in 2.16 squared, which is just an approximation for the standard deviation. And we could have gotten a value that is close enough. So again, standard deviation, squaring that value gives us the sample variance. The standard deviation measures the typical change or the expected amount of variation from the mean. Larger variance or dispersion of data values leads to larger standard deviations. The more these values vary, the larger the standard deviation will be. Now, based on the type of question, you might have to either find the sample standard deviation. The sample standard deviation, as mentioned earlier, is the letter S, and to type that into GeoGebra, you just type in STDEV. If the example is dealing with population data, you might have to find the population standard deviation. The population standard deviation is the symbol sigma, and in order to type this into GeoGebra, we need to put a P after STDEV. So STDEV-P, and then type in our data. So again, the standard deviation measures the typical amount of change from the mean. The more these data values vary, the larger the standard deviation. Here is the symbols for sample standard deviation and sample variance, as well as the population standard deviation. If you need to find the population variance, you do the same thing. Take the sigma, or the population standard deviation, and square it, and that will be the population variance.